your guide to the truth. TheNewAmericanMedia.com.
Hello, everybody. Brian Engelman here with The New American Media, and I'm pleased to be joined with Immortal Technique. Hello, sir. Hey, pleasure to meet you as well. I gotta say, I have become a fan of, I've heard some of your music, and I have been blown away with how articulate and conscious and relevant your diagnoses of the political system, just this world in general. I think you're an amazing voice out there, and I'm really glad to have you on the side of people paying attention. So it's a pleasure to interview you. You've been the guy I've been trying to track down all day. Tell us real quick, we're here at this festival. Why is it important to you what this was put together to do?
Well, Free and Equal was presented to me as the idea of getting past bipartisanship, the idea that we as individuals don't have to choose from column A or column B every time that there's a problem. You know, if there's something broken in your house and the only tools you have are a hammer or a screwdriver, then you're going to think that every problem is a nail or a screw, and sometimes it's just not that easy to fix. Right. So I feel like giving a voice to those people who are independents is what democracy was supposed to be about. You know, that's what the point of this country was, to give people the voice of equality. And I think that that's not being shown right now with the present system that exists. You know, you have a wide array of inequality that exists on a level like, for example, legal protection. People have severe inequality based on wealth. You know, when people go to prison, that's not based on how guilty you are, because we've seen plenty of guilty people who have the capacity to hire legal representation that's vastly superior to anything the state can find. And then what? You know, so I feel like if we really do care and we're really presenting ourselves as American citizens that want to make a change in this country, then we have to be willing to sacrifice for it. In my mind, that was saying I need to take more control of my career in the music, and what I sacrificed is having a gigantic major label that knew I was a talented writer and knew I was good at what I did, and said, well, fine, if you don't want to give us control of anything, then we're not going to work with you. And that's where it ended, you know, and I don't feel a bit sorry for that every day of my life, because I appreciate the independence that I have, and I appreciate the ability to talk about lots of different topics. And the Free and Equal Festival is another place, and United We Stand, and all the people that have done these type of events that I've been involved with. You know, this especially today exemplifies that.
You know, Macklemore, I'm not sure how familiar you are with his work, obviously a little bit. He has a song about going through the record company process, and I think it's a Jimmy Iovine when he has his meeting, and he does this whole song about it. When did you have the opportunity presented to maybe sign a major label, and what was that your core decision to switch? And you know, because it is tough. They dangling all this money in front of you. Dave Chappelle's talked about it. There's a lot of people saying that the media, especially music and movies, controlled by certain interests that want to put a certain product out there and kind of sell your soul in the process. What was the whole experience like?
Well, I mean, I think you have to explain to people this part, that it's not just on the company, it's on the artists themselves. You have to be intelligent enough to understand what you're signing and what you're getting involved in. You know, you have to learn the business. I tell people, look, you wouldn't show up if you were a shark hunter and just be like, hey, I want to do that job, and just show up with no training. You don't know how to fucking swim. You've never seen a shark before. You never tried to kill one, but all of a sudden you're an expert, right? That's how people try to approach hip-hop sometimes. Like, I don't know anything about it. Hey, I'm going to do this. They do the same thing with concert promoting. Hey, man, I'm going to throw a show. I know artists, and all of a sudden, you know, it's not as easy as it would seem. But
And I've been a concert promoter, and it took me a couple years of training under some failed concerts and sending me to down to Nashville and learning from people that have done it in order to have a clue to do it. And even then, it took a team of 86 people and a bunch of student advisors to really help me not screw it up.
Right, and I think when we look at that and we see the type of effort that it takes just for a hip-hop show, right, then imagine running a government, running a people. Like, I think the whole point of understanding revolution is understanding that it always betrays itself, you know? It doesn't matter what revolution it is, you always find people that want a consolidation of power after there's liberty. You know, whether that's in America, whether it's in China, Cuba, Iran, there was always a consolidation of power after a revolutionary struggle. It's always been that way. I think it's a human condition. Rather than having instability, people crave stability under the guise of abuse. You know? And there's no pretty way about it. It's almost as if the human race is a person who's in an abusive relationship and just can't imagine anything beyond that. You know what I mean?
It's a collective amnesia of you're on the hamster wheel, and it's like you got from freedom to apathy, from apathy to on the back way back to bondage, from bondage to spiritual faith, from this to that, and then you're back to freedom again.
But I think in this case, what we're discussing is that, look, if you're going to end up being a part of any revolutionary struggle, then not only do you have to realize that, yes, they betray themselves to some degree, but in all revolutions, innocent people die. I tell you this.
Collateral damage.
Innocent people are murdered, innocent women are raped, innocent people's property is stolen. That's just the case when you have the transfer of one system to another. And the reality is that people are willing to risk that. If the things and conditions have gotten that bad, they're willing to risk losing their lives. They're willing to risk their children's lives, their parents' lives. Whether it's in this country, like I said, whether it's in Iran, whether it's in China, people thought the system that existed there was so abusive and so oppressive that they said, no, we're going to fight against it and we're going to have a revolution. But we're willing to risk it. We're willing to put it all on the table. And that's why I advise people all the time against the idea of just rambling on about sedition or you want to waive the Second Amendment and put a gun on YouTube and then talk about how you're going to kill people and oh, if this government, that's the last thing that should happen. That is the absolute final last straw. If there's no other and you only have to protect yourself is when violence should be taken into account in revolution. You should never start with that play. And I think too many people romanticize it and they think that revolution's about running around a jungle with an AK-47. No, it's about waking up at 6 o'clock in the morning to print 5,000 flyers that maybe half them people are gonna fucking crumple and throw away because you know that you're gonna reach somebody. It's about organizing individuals who don't realize how much power they have until you show them, man, you determine the fate of this. You're the workers, you're the guys who open the door. You can say, hey, I don't feel like opening the door, and no one's going to open the door. Don't be afraid of your power. Revolution is going to kids that are coming from another country and saying, hey man, don't forget your native language, don't forget your native history. That's a beautiful culture. You know, how would a person say, hey, I just want to learn to add and subtract. I don't want to learn to divide and multiply. That doesn't make sense. Why wouldn't you want to learn another language? Why you kind of America, you should just speak English. Why? Why would you deprive yourself of learning French or Mandarin or Spanish so you can communicate with millions of more people, so you can create more job opportunities, more family opportunities? If you find somebody to love that might give a shit about you more than anyone that speaks the language that you speak, what if your soulmate don't speak the language that you speak?
You'll never find them. No, and that's what the Renaissance was about. It was about music. It was about art. It was about different languages. It was about sports. It was about being as well-rounded as humanly possible, not being having such tunnel vision that you miss the stuff around you. And you touched on something about when the system gets so bad that people have to reach that point. I mean, the Founding Fathers, they pledged their lives, their liberty, and their sacred honor. When they signed that Declaration of Independence, that was a death warrant. You know, and
terrorists and traitors.
Absolutely. And now the Department of Homeland Security looks at what I think are a lot of the good guys saying, oh, they're potential terrorists. The question I was going to ask, have you always been awake? Because Blake's filming this. He considers himself a recovering Democrat. I consider myself a recovering Republican. What was the moment that maybe snapped you out of what you thought things were?
Well, I mean, I can't say that I had an epiphany where all of a sudden I decided that the world was different. But I will say this, that at some point we all become self-aware, right? We all become self-aware about who our parents are, about who we are. We stop trying to be cool about the person we are, and we say, hey man, this is who I am, whether you like me or not. And I think that at a very young age, I was a really smart kid. So when you're smart and you live in a hood, people associate that with being soft. They think that you're weak because you're intelligent. So for my young life, I always had to fight with people a lot. So I grew into sort of an aggressive person where it was like, listen, I'm going to tell you my opinion. I'm going to give you the facts that I have. And if you don't like that and you think that you can silence me with physical pressure, it's not going to work. We're both going to get hurt. And not only am I going to hurt you, but all your peoples can get it too. I don't give a fuck. And then I realized, you know, what am I really fighting? Who am I really fighting for? And then I had to come to terms with the ideas about actual revolution. Like for Latin America, You know, our revolution doesn't begin with communism or socialism. That's an 18th century concept that comes from Europe, a 19th century concept that comes from Europe. We didn't need Europeans to come to the dark jungles of Africa and Latin America and explain to us the complex concept of sharing. We knew what that was for millennia. You know what I mean?
Mayan culture's been around for a long time. Egypt has kind of been there for a while.
You can't say that. You can't just come to me and say, for example, oh, you know, communism's a failed system or socialism's a failed system, without saying, hey, by the way, capitalism is also a failed system because it used socialism to bail itself out of a banking crisis.
Too big to fail.
Right, but that's the point that I'm trying to make. Nothing is impervious to the human condition, so to speak. And I just close by saying, you know, always remember that the reason that things are divided are not always for the characteristics that you would like to assume. Like, people think the first division of church and state comes from the state needing to protect itself from the church's influence. But in reality, the separation of church and state is first implemented by Pope Gelasius I in the late 5th century. He wrote a document called the Duo Sant, the power of the bishops and the power of the princes. And he said, never in the history of man must you combine religion and state, because the state will always corrupt the religion, and people think religion is infallible. The state can be argued with. A dictator can die, and people will say, you was wrong. We were afraid to say it while he was alive. God is eternal. You must never question the people who speak for God. So I think that's the point in which we gain the reality and the knowledge of understanding, hey, we have to look at ourselves and see, what did we contribute to this clusterfuck of a situation?
And final question then, and we'll get you going because you're getting on stage here. What is the spiritual component to you as you bring that up? I mean, because a lot of men argue over whose definition of God is more correct, and there's very little that's more disgusting to me than that. You know, Thomas Jefferson, you can, whether you worship one God or 20 gods, if it neither breaks my leg nor picks my pocket, what do I care? I'm paraphrasing, obviously. But how does this concept of spirituality influence your music and the concept of a better political system in a day-to-day life on this planet?
Well, I will say this, you know, just to expound on that point. For me, I feel like if your religion helps you to be less selfish, if your religion helps you be more understanding, more open, if it helps you to become more giving and more forgiving, not just of other people, but most of all of yourself.
Giving and forgiving.
If that's what your religion does for you, then God bless you. But if all your religion does is make you more judgmental of other people, like you're so insecure in yourself that I can't stand that you believe something different, that's insecurity on my part, brother. That has nothing to do with your beliefs. How can I be offended and hurt by what you believe when your beliefs have nothing to do with me? However, if you believe in your mind that my people are the descendants of Ham and, you know, God, we've been cursed since the moment we got here and there's no real history of wisdom or knowledge or masonry in our history, then obviously you're doing not only us but yourself a disservice. But I always tell people, man, if you're using your religion for a positive thing, if you're using your spirituality for a positive thing, then that's always great. If you're using it to uplift other people, to inspire them, that's fine. But it shouldn't be a point to proselytize. You know what I mean? Revolution is not a place where you're just supposed to show up to try and get people to be part of your church. Like, that's not the
follow my cult.
Right. You know, we're not here to worship an individual.
Absolutely. Well, it's about that time. Real quick, where can people find out more information about you? What are you working on right now? All that jazz.
You can find me at viperrecords.com. You got a free album you can download called Immortal. You can find me on Facebook /TechImmortal, Immortal Tech Twitter /Immortal Tech, and Instagram /TechImmortal. That's on my social media. But just remember that socializing on the internet is to socializing what reality TV is to reality. So when you're watching this, please go out and go meet someone you really care about, or look into someone's eyes, like your mom or your dad, and tell them you love them and you give a fuck about them. Don't send an email, send a real letter. Be more human to each other. Peace.
Well, I'll tell you what, that's why we reached out to you today, and we reached out and met you in person. Thank you for your time so much.